sometimes I find it a bit unclear as to to what extent Limud Torah should be prioritized in relation to other types of study. For example, history, political things, even perhaps great classical novels, great classical material of other kinds. One can, I can see a more for this. I don't want to use this term stam, but for the sake of this purpose, say that I could see the more so-called Haredi approach as having a logic to it, because if Torah is also of such a tremendous value, then why should one spend any time reading any type of book about history, science? And it also reminds me, when I was growing up, I was exposed to the idea from Yeshiva University, Rabbi Lamb, the idea of sort of the knowledge is all being connected to Torah in some ways, sort of a candelabra, where the various secular areas of knowledge are also in some ways part of a bigger picture of Torah. So can the Rav give any clarification on this issue?
Your question is a good one, but the answer to this question or this discussion is very involved. And it is definitely not one size fits all. And therefore it requires much elaboration, and we cannot do that right now. And it also varies from person to person, from situation to situation. Sometimes you could even say it has a lot to do with the historicals and social context. It varies from generation to generation. And all of that is true. And that's exactly why it cannot really be answered in a couple of sentences. What one can most definitely say is that the foundation, the basis of a young Jew's education must be the Torah in its purest and undiluted and unadulterated sense. From the earliest age, as which we shall see later, and certainly up to the beginning of adulthood, that should be the main and the main focus of a person's education, so that a person has a solid foundation and ideological framework. Afterwards, as one grows older and more mature, and again, this varies from person to person, there is room for discussion for other areas of study, which can be very important, particularly for certain types of people who will have to deal with and therefore they will have to first know. Before you can deal with something, you have to be aware of it. You have to have some knowledge of it and experience of it. You have to be, in order to be able to deal with and discuss other ideologies or certain ideas that other Jews will run into, in order to provide them with direction. The Chacham will often will find it necessary to make himself familiar with these things. And it also depends on the person's natural dispositions and intellect. Such a Chacham will likely find himself drawn to certain things because they interest him as well, because he's a thinking person, and there is this idea or this philosophy or this ideology or this claim out there in the world, and you have to somehow come to terms with it and deal with it. And you cannot do that without addressing it seriously. But not every person has to spend much time and energy discussing and learning these things. For most people, it's not necessary, and it's not even advisable. For some people, it is. And these are things that become clear to the student of Torah intuitively over time. It also may be that his teachers will explain to him that right now you should not be you don't need to spend time with this, or actually you should be, for various reasons. And that's why all these things are they need to be discussed and examined in light of the individual who's asking the question, or who's wondering about his path and his direction in life, or what he should spend some of his time on. This will become clear over time. But the basis, the foundation of any Jew's education has to be first based thoroughly and entirely on the worldview and the essential ideology of Torah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
But you're not. I don't think. I just don't want what you're saying to be misunderstood. You're not implying that at the elementary school or high school level that no non-Torah subject should be taught.
Well, this raises another question. What is a non-Torah subject? Is arithmetic is not an explicit part of Talmud Torah on the one hand. On the other hand, there are many basic things in the Torah that you will not be able to do without a basic knowledge of arithmetic. You will not be able to calculate the volume of your dough, whether it's chayav b'chala, whether you have to take chala. You will not know how to construct a mikveh, which has to be of a certain size, a certain volume, etc. If you don't know anything about even basic arithmetic, you will not be able to do these things. In other words, the Torah is assuming, at least in certain areas of life, a basic knowledge and awareness of that which is required to be a functional human being in the world. So such things as arithmetic are required, reading and writing are required. Now, to read and understand Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue, the Hebrew language, the language of the Torah, that is part of the Mitzvah of Talmud Torah, as we shall discuss. And if, because of one's situation, one's surroundings and environment, it is necessary to know other languages, and that is also part of what is required of a Jew in order to be a functional and viable human being. One doesn't have to understand calculus in order to be a functional human being. For certain purposes, it's very necessary. But for most people on a day-to-day basis, it's really not that necessary at all. And many people will not be able to grasp it anyhow. So what's the point of trying to teach them? So it depends on the individual, it depends on their direction in life. It's certainly not something that a child has to know at the age of 11, and not necessarily even the age of 13. A person who is capable of understanding higher level mathematics, shall we say, or physics, if that person dedicates himself to the study of Torah during his youth, and then wishes to pick up these subjects at, shall we say, the age of 18 or 20, if he has the mental wherewithal, he will be most certainly able to do so, and he will pick it up very quickly, and he will very likely surpass most of his peers who didn't spend years studying Torah. And this is known, this is attested to by the Israeli Air Force, that certain people from a Haredi background who entered the Air Force and studied certain areas to do with computer science or mathematics or something, they pick these things up in a very, very impressive way, very quickly, with great understanding. Another basic thing that is required, I think, is a very basic knowledge of geography of the world. I'm referring here to general knowledge, basic understanding of geography, and having at least some awareness of various races and cultures, civilizations of the past and of the present, and history. It is necessary to have a basic grasp of history. I mean, for that matter, if you want to learn Sefer Daniel, and you find in Sefer Daniel it discusses various empires that rose and fell, well then you're going to have to study this anyhow, at least to some extent. You're going to have to know there was a Persian Empire, and there were Greeks, and there were Romans, and all kinds of things, and you need to know this. And it's impossible to be a serious human being without at least a basic knowledge and understanding of these things. But that is not the same at all, of course, as teaching transgender studies to primary school children, or for that matter to high school people in high school, or for that matter people in university. In general, I think universities, and I'm not the only person to make this claim, by and large have lost their way, and it can be debated whether by and large universities do more harm than good nowadays. I do not think gender studies propel humankind forward. And the same could be said for many things that are studied today in universities. Certain things are extremely important, as we discussed. STEM studies, an objective study of history to understand and to know generally what has gone on, what has transpired in the world, in human history, in the past, because without a knowledge of the past, one doesn't really understand the present. And without that, one has no knowledge or no ability to conceive at all of the future. So one has to distinguish between various studies. So the things that you mentioned, I think, are important and can and should be studied in all Torah educational systems. And I think this was assumed by Hazal and by Chachamim of later generations, that people would not be brought up in such a way that they have they lack even the most basic general knowledge. This is not a reasonable state of affairs.
So, Rabbi, so you would agree that in the Haredi system, perhaps they've gone too far the other way, and elementary school kids and high school kids aren't being given sufficient general types of knowledge?
Unfortunately, I would have to agree with that assessment. One can understand why the system developed as it developed, but as a response, an extreme response to the opposite tendencies in the Jewish world in the 19th century, shall we say. But we also see that the result is far from the desired outcome, and this can be changed and can be improved upon. And by the way, I would mention that a lot depends also on the home. Not everything has to come from the school. The school has a certain function, and if for example you have a school which does a wonderful job of teaching Torah and midot and living a Torah lifestyle, but doesn't find the time or doesn't have the inclination or the ability to teach anything in the way of history, shall we say, well, then the parents should be able to do something about that. There are books, they can discuss things at the table, they can provide their children with certain materials. It is possible and necessary to make up for that lacking. It also follows that if the parents themselves know nothing about these things and do not appreciate the importance of these things, they will not think to do so. So it's a generational process. So I think we'll end here for today. Hayu Baruchim, Hizku, Uyamis Levavchem, Kol HaMe'achalim L'Adonai. Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.